I always believed that families grow closer with time, but mine felt like it was drifting away from me one quiet day at a time. My daughter, Claire, used to visit me every weekend. She would come in smiling, talking about work, laughing at old photos, and telling me about her plans. After she married Ethan Clark, things changed in ways I never expected. At first, I tried to understand. Marriage brings new responsibilities, new routines, and new expectations. I told myself she just needed space. But as the months passed, I started noticing the small signs that something was different. She would visit only for a few minutes, always checking the time. Whenever I asked how she was doing, she would look toward the door or glance at her phone as if she was afraid of being late. And her calls, they became shorter and less frequent, almost as if someone was listening on the other side. Ethan always acted polite around me, but there was something behind his smile. A sharpness, a pride that made him feel bigger than everyone else in the room. He never said anything openly rude, but every comment had a hidden edge. A remark about my old car, a joke about my simple home, a comment about how some people should learn how things are done these days. I understood his meaning every time, but I never reacted. Silence was easier. One evening, Claire invited me to dinner at their home. I hoped it would be a warm family night, but from the moment I walked in, I knew I shouldn't have expected much. Ethan's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Clark, were already seated, dressed neatly as if they were attending an award ceremony. They gave me the kind of smile people give when they believe they are being generous. "Harold," Mrs. Clark said, "you made it. How lovely." Her tone told me she didn't mean it. We sat at the table, and the meal began with light conversation, or rather, conversation that sounded light but carried weight. Ethan spoke about business trips and expensive restaurants. His father nodded proudly. His mother asked Claire questions that made her sound like a child needing guidance. I simply listened. At one point, Ethan looked at me and said, "Harold, you should try traveling more. It opens the mind." His father chuckled softly. I smiled and replied, "I travel enough for my own peace." Ethan shrugged, clearly annoyed that I didn't rise to his comments. As the evening went on, Claire tried to start a warm conversation with me, but her words kept getting cut off by Ethan's remarks or his parents' suggestions. She looked tired, like someone walking on thin ice. Then, near the end of dinner, a small argument broke out between Ethan and Claire. It wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough that everyone felt it. I sat quietly, watching the room shift. It was clear Ethan was preparing something bigger, something he hadn't yet announced. I finished my meal, thanked them for the evening, and went home with a calm heart. I had learned long ago that silence often reveals more than loud voices. Before we continue, please comment where you are watching from and don't forget to subscribe for more interesting stories. A week after that tense dinner, I got a call from Claire. Her voice sounded soft, almost unsure, like she was practicing what to say before the words left her mouth. "Dad, are you free tonight? Ethan wants to share something with the family." I told her I would come. I always showed up when she asked, even when I felt the distance growing between us. When I arrived at their home, I noticed something different. Everyone was already sitting in the living room, dressed neatly, almost like a small meeting was about to begin. Mr. and Mrs. Clark sat together, smiling in a way that told me they already knew what Ethan was going to say. Ethan stood up as soon as I walked in. "Harold, good timing. We were just about to start." I nodded and sat down. He cleared his throat and held Claire's hand, though she didn't look comfortable. "We're taking a family vacation," he announced proudly. "A full week at the Seabridge Resort. It'll be good for everyone." Claire looked at me quickly, then looked away. Something in her eyes told me the news wasn't as simple as it sounded. Ethan continued, "And before you ask, Harold, we couldn't get a ticket for you. There's only enough money for us and my parents." Mr. Clark nodded, as if the decision was wise. Mrs. Clark folded her hands neatly, her face smooth with satisfaction. I looked at Claire. She still wouldn't meet my eyes. I smiled softly and said, "That's all right. You all go and enjoy yourselves." Ethan looked surprised that I didn't react. Maybe he expected anger or disappointment, but I didn't give him either. Silence can be stronger than shouting. He went on explaining the dates, the flight time, the hotel rooms, and all the activities they would do. Every so often, he glanced at me, waiting for me to complain or question the decision. I didn't. My quietness bothered him more than any argument could. When the day of their trip arrived, I drove to their house to take them to the airport. Claire looked relieved when she saw me. Ethan seemed confused. "You didn't have to come," he said. "I wanted to," I replied. During the drive, the Clarks talked loudly about the vacation beaches, food, relaxation, anything to make it sound like a grand event. I simply focused on the road. Claire remained mostly quiet, staring out the window with a small, sad expression she tried to hide. At the airport, I helped them unload their luggage. Mrs. Clark thanked me politely, but with the same distant smile she always had. Ethan shook my hand quickly and said, "Take care of yourself at home, Harold." "I always do," I answered. They walked toward the terminal, believing I would return to an empty house and a quiet week alone. I watched them disappear through the glass doors. Then I turned, pulled out my phone, and made a call calmly and quietly, confirming a plan I had arranged long before they even left the house. I headed toward my own car, ready to begin a very different journey. The Seabridge Resort sat on a long stretch of white sand, with tall palm trees lining the entrance and bright blue water shining behind the buildings. When I arrived that morning, the air smelled like the ocean, and soft music played around the lobby. It felt peaceful, nothing like the tension I had left behind the day the Clarks flew out. I checked in quietly and settled into my room. I spent the day walking along the beach, reading, and enjoying the quiet hours that I rarely got at home. I didn't come here to cause trouble. I came because I had every right to be where I wished, and I had made my own plans long before Ethan tried to push me aside. By late afternoon, I sat in the hotel lounge with a cup of tea. The chairs were soft, the air cool, and families walked past with smiles on their faces. I watched the sun begin to set through the tall glass windows. It was peaceful. My thoughts were calm. Around early evening, I saw the Clark family entering the lobby through the main doors. Their suitcases rolled behind them as they admired the decorations. They looked excited, fresh from their flight, ready to enjoy their vacation without a single thought of me. Ethan's voice carried through the lobby. "This place looks better than the pictures," he said, puffing out his chest. His parents nodded proudly. Claire stayed close behind them, holding her handbag tightly. They walked toward the front desk, talking loudly, laughing, and pointing at the large fountain nearby. I stayed seated, not trying to hide, just sipping my tea at my small table in the open. It took a moment for Claire to notice me. She turned her head slightly, then froze. Her mouth opened a little, but no sound came out. She blinked, rubbed her eyes lightly, and stared again, as if she believed she was seeing a ghost. Mr. Clark was the next to notice. He stopped mid-sentence, eyes wide, confusion covering his face. Ethan finally followed their gaze. He turned, and when he saw me sitting there calmly with my cup of tea, he stopped walking completely. His suitcase rolled a few more inches before tipping over. What are you doing here?" he said, his voice rising too quickly. His mother gasped loudly, covering her mouth. His father stepped forward, pointing at me. Claire stood frozen, her eyes filling with emotion she couldn't hide. Ethan stormed toward me, anger rushing to his face. "Did you follow us? Are you serious?" he shouted. "Are you actually stalking us now?" Guests around the lobby turned to watch. People whispered, some pausing in their steps. Claire reached out, trying to calm Ethan, but he pulled his arm away. Mr. and Mrs. Clark joined in, voices sharp and accusing. "You should leave this hotel," Mrs. Clark said. "This is not your place." Mr. Clark added, "This is unacceptable behavior." I looked at all of them calmly, saying nothing. I simply set down my cup and folded my hands. Their voices grew louder. Their anger grew stronger. And the crowd grew bigger. I remained silent. I had expected this reaction long before they ever stepped into the lobby. Ethan's voice echoed through the lobby, sharp and loud enough that several guests stopped walking just to stare. The Clarks had formed a tight circle around me, Ethan in front, his parents on each side, and Claire behind them, looking helpless and embarrassed. I sat calmly, letting them speak, letting their anger rise as high as it wanted. "Answer me," Ethan shouted. "Why are you here?" His fists were clenched, his face red. I didn't speak. I didn't flinch. I simply looked at him with steady eyes. Mrs. Clark stepped closer. "This is wrong, Harold. You followed our family. That is disturbing behavior." Her voice shook with anger she had been holding back for months. Mr. Clark added, "You have no business being here. This is a private trip. You are ruining it already." Claire tried to touch Ethan's arm. "Please stop. People are watching." Her voice trembled as her eyes filled with tears. Ethan pulled away again. Good. Let them watch him embarrass himself. I could feel the weight of every gaze in the room. Some people were whispering, others shaking their heads, and a few were recording with their phones. But I stayed still, letting their assumptions fill the space. Silence can cut deeper than shouting. A uniformed hotel security officer approached, walking with a cautious but confident step. Sir, what seems to be the problem here? He asked Ethan. This man followed us, Ethan cried, pointing at me. He shouldn't be here. He needs to be removed from this hotel immediately. The security officer looked at me. I met his eyes calmly, and he hesitated, unsure if he should act without knowing more. I will call my chief, he said, stepping back. Mrs. Clark scoffed loudly. We shouldn't need a whole team for this, just take him out. The officer didn't answer her. He simply walked toward his radio and spoke into it quietly. Claire sat down on a nearby chair, covering her face with her hands. I could see her shoulders shaking. Ethan didn't notice. He was too busy pacing, waving his hands, and repeating his accusations to anyone within earshot. Minutes later, the chief security officer arrived. He walked with authority, his uniform pressed neatly, his expression serious and controlled. His name tag read Andrew Collins. He stood tall in front of us, observing the scene carefully. What is the issue here? He asked in a calm but firm tone. Ethan spoke before anyone else could. This man, Harold Bennett, followed us here. He wasn't invited. He's causing trouble. Remove him from the hotel right now. Andrew Collins turned his eyes to me. There was no anger in his gaze, only assessment. Sir, he said respectfully, may I see your identification? The lobby grew quiet. Even Ethan stopped pacing. I reached slowly into my pocket and handed over my identification without a single word. Andrew took it gently, his eyes scanning the card. His expression changed almost immediately, subtle but clear. The kind of change only someone trained to hide emotion would make. He looked up, straightened himself, and turned toward Ethan and his parents. And the mood around us shifted in a way none of them understood. The quiet in the lobby felt as heavy as a closed door. Mr. Collins held my identification in his hand and looked at it again, slowly. He did not speak right away. I could see he was weighing what to do. The clerks in the small crowd waited, breathing in the same slow, stunned rhythm. Mr. Bennett, Andrew said at last, his voice low and careful. Please stand with me for a moment. I rose and walked to him. He motioned for Ethan and his parents to step forward. They looked puzzled and angry, still standing with faces flushed from shouting. Claire stood behind them, her hands clasped so tightly I could see the whiteness of her knuckles. Andrew spoke quietly to Ethan and his parents. I heard the first few words and then watched their faces change. The pride that had filled their chests drained away like water from a cup. The colour left their cheeks. Ethan's mouth opened, then closed. Mrs. Clark's smooth smile crumpled. Mr. Clark's chin dropped as if someone had taken all his breath. By protocol, Andrew said, his tone steady. This gentleman is to be treated with respect. He is a founding guest and a benefactor of this establishment. He holds a position on the board that oversees the hotel's operations. Out of respect for his role and the contributions he made to build this place, an apology is required. A murmur ran through the crowd. I could feel each person turning their head slowly, searching my face for a sign or perhaps for doubt. Ethan's anger tried to rise again, like a small flame that hoped to burn through the news. But when Andrew finished speaking, Ethan's feet felt heavy. He looked at his parents, then at me. Please, Andrew added, kneel as an act of apology and acceptance of responsibility. It is the courtesy our house asks when a guest of honour is wronged. Ethan swallowed hard. He looked around at the still faces of strangers who had grown quiet and watchful. For a long moment, he did nothing. Then, to my surprise and the shock of everyone, he dropped to his knees. His parents followed him, graceful only in their defeat. Claire sank to a chair and covered her face with her hands. Tears traced clean lines down her cheeks. When they knelt, something shifted. The loud, careless world they had carried folded in on itself. The air felt different, clearer and cooler. People around us whispered, some with sympathy, some with shame. Even the phones in a few hands were lowered. Andrew stood close and spoke softly to Ethan and his parents. I could not hear every word, but I saw the quick nods, the small, stiff bows they made. I watched Ethan's shoulders shake as he tried to steady himself. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. Claire came to my side then, her eyes red. She reached out and touched my arm. Her hand trembled. I put my hand over hers and held it there, steady. When she quieted, I spoke to them all. I did not shout. I did not need to. My voice was calm and clear. "You raised a good man, Claire," I said, looking at her. "You married a strong man, Ethan. None of that means you have to forget what family is. Respect does not cost money. It costs only the heart." Ethan lifted his head slowly. He met my eyes. For the first time in a long while, I saw something like understanding there, small, fragile, but real. Andrew stepped back and let the room breathe again. The Clarks rose slowly from their knees. They were not proud, but they were quieter, softer. Claire steadied herself and smiled weakly. I felt the weight of the evening lift a little. We left the lobby together, not as enemies, but not fully as friends either. Some things had changed that night, some doors had been closed, and a few opened a little wider. I walked beside my daughter with a calm step and a steady heart. When we reached the warm evening air outside, Claire squeezed my hand and whispered, "Thank you, Dad." I smiled and answered simply, "You are welcome. Now, let us go home." Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more interesting revenge stories.